It started with a private disagreement inside Clarence's house, one so tense that senior aides reportedly stopped speaking the moment the doors opened. Queen Camilla had allegedly expected Queen Mary's diamond coronation tiara to be prepared for an upcoming royal appearance. But according to palace whispers, King Charles himself intervened, and what followed has now triggered one of the most explosive jewelry disputes the monarchy has faced since the sun-drenched coronation of 2023. At first, it was treated like another quiet matter of wardrobe, another private decision buried beneath layers of royal protocol. But inside the palace, nothing connected to the crown jewels is ever simple. Every diamond carries history. Every setting carries memory. Every tiara speaks a language older than popularity, older than marriage, older than personal preference. So when reports began circulating that Queen Camilla had requested access to Queen Mary's diamond coronation tiara, the reaction behind palace doors was not casual. It was immediate, cold, and deeply revealing. According to insiders, palace dressers and jewel custodians were suddenly placed under strict silence. No explanations, no casual confirmations, no loose remarks to friendly journalists. That alone made royal observers pause because silence inside the monarchy is rarely empty. It is usually a warning. And this silence seemed to say that something had crossed a line. Then came the alleged intervention from King Charles. Not a delayed memo, not a polite adjustment, a personal halt. Reports suggest Charles stepped in before the arrangement could move forward, and the message was unmistakable. Queen Mary's diamond coronation tiara was not to be touched under the current circumstances. Those words, whispered through palace corridors, landed like a quiet thunderclap because this was not just a husband denying his wife a jewel. This was a king protecting an inheritance from becoming a controversy. Almost instantly, old tensions resurfaced. Royal insiders began speaking of the divide between Camilla's circle and the older bloodline traditions that Queen Elizabeth II had guarded with such careful discipline. The late queen understood jewels not as decoration but as sacred instruments of legitimacy. They were never merely worn. They were entrusted. And trust in this story became the dangerous word no one wanted to say aloud. For Camilla, the restraint was visible. Media observers noticed a softer public posture, a carefulness that seemed almost forced. For Charles, the decision reportedly carried emotional weight because blocking the request meant admitting that even the queen consort's position had limits. And for the palace, it raised the question that would not disappear. Was this truly about protocol? Or had the king quietly decided that some symbols still belonged to the monarchy before they belonged to any individual? But the real battle was never just about diamonds. It was about who truly has the right to carry the visual legacy of the crown. Long before palace tensions exploded behind closed doors, Queen Mary's diamond coronation tiara had already become something far more dangerous than ceremonial jewelry. Within royal circles, it represented continuity, legitimacy, and the sacred visual language of monarchy itself. And according to various interpretations of royal protocol, not everyone was ever meant to wear it. The tiara's power begins with Queen Mary herself, a royal figure who understood that monarchy did not survive on affection alone. It survived through symbols, through discipline, through objects so carefully guarded that they became almost untouchable. Queen Mary's diamond coronation tiara was not created to decorate a private evening. It belonged to the language of coronation, sovereignty, inheritance, and public duty. That is why inside the palace, this piece is reportedly spoken of with a caution that ordinary jewelry could never command. For generations, certain royal jewels have been treated less like possessions and more like national witnesses. They have watched reigns begin, crises unfold, families fracture, and crowns pass from one generation to the next. Reports suggest Queen Elizabeth II understood this better than anyone. To her, the most important jewels were not personal rewards. They were institutional assets held in trust for something larger than the wearer. That quiet belief shaped how she loaned them, protected them, and withheld them when necessary. This is why the current dispute has become so emotionally charged. Because Queen Mary's tiara does not simply sparkle with diamonds. It carries the weight of royal memory. It sits in the same sacred world as the royal collection, Balmoral's private legacy, and the objects that quietly define the House of Windsor's authority. Royal historians have often noted that the monarchy survives through restraint as much as grandeur. The right jewel worn by the wrong person at the wrong moment can shift public meaning instantly. And that was reportedly the fear among senior courtiers. If Camilla wore the tiara again during a period of family tension and public sensitivity, would it be seen as continuity or overreach? Would the nation read it as dignity or as possession? Those questions are said to have moved through palace circles with increasing urgency, especially because Queen Elizabeth II's shadow still hangs over every decision connected to legacy. For Camilla, this made the tiara more than an accessory. It became a test of acceptance, a sign that she had not only become queen, but had been fully absorbed into the deepest ceremonial memory of the crown. Yet for the old guard, that same act risked disturbing a carefully guarded inheritance. The palace could survive criticism over clothing. It could survive whispers over seating plans. But jewels tied to coronation history were different. They touched the nerve of legitimacy itself. And as the symbolism grew heavier, whispers began spreading that Camilla's determination to secure the tiara had triggered alarms deep inside the royal old guard. According to palace administrative whispers, the conflict escalated when Camilla's team allegedly pushed harder than expected for access to the historic piece. What may have begun as a wardrobe discussion soon transformed into something far more explosive, a confrontation over influence, hierarchy, and the invisible lines Queen Elizabeth II had reportedly drawn years earlier. At first, Camilla's aides reportedly treated the matter as routine. An appearance was being prepared, ceremonial details were being reviewed, and the question of jewelry entered the conversation with quiet confidence. But confidence inside a palace can become dangerous when it moves too close to protected territory. The moment Queen Mary's diamond coronation tiara was allegedly linked to those plans, the atmosphere shifted. The request was no longer seen as decorative. It was seen as symbolic. Senior custodians are said to have objected almost immediately. Not loudly, not publicly. That is not how the palace moves. Their resistance came through delays, questions, missing confirmations, and careful references to precedent. Every hesitation carried meaning. Every postponed approval suggested that someone somewhere believed the request had gone too far, and soon what Camilla's circle may have expected to pass quietly became trapped in the machinery of royal caution. Different interpretations suggest William's camp quietly supported that resistance, not with dramatic confrontation, but with the kind of silent pressure that carries enormous weight inside royal life. For the future king, this was reportedly about optics and legacy, two words that can decide everything in a monarchy built on public trust. The tiara did not simply belong to the present moment. It belonged to a chain of meaning stretching through Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth II, and the future reign waiting just beyond Charles. That is why old comparisons began resurfacing. Past disputes over royal jewels, past arguments over ceremonial privileges, past moments when access to a crown object became a measure of status. The palace remembers everything, even when it pretends to forget. And in this case, every remembered dispute made the current one more dangerous. Reports suggest Charles grew increasingly uncomfortable as the tension deepened. He was caught between private loyalty and public duty, between the woman beside him and the institution above them both. The more Camilla's aides pressed, the heavier the decision became. Media insiders later noted unusual delays and last-minute changes, the kind that rarely happen without a reason. Something had clearly been interrupted. Inside the royal machine, factions began to harden. Modernizers may have seen the request as natural recognition of Camilla's place. Traditionalists reportedly saw it as a breach of emotional boundaries left behind by Queen Elizabeth II. And once that divide opened, the tiara became a battlefield, not because of its diamonds, but because of what wearing it would announce. Then came the moment that reportedly stunned even seasoned palace veterans. Sources close to royal administrative circles claim King Charles personally blocked the final approval process. For many inside the monarchy, it was the clearest sign yet that the king, despite his fragile condition since early 2024, was still willing to draw hard lines when the institution itself felt threatened. The alleged halt did not arrive like a public confrontation. It came in the quiet, controlled language of royal power. A decision was paused. Authorization was withheld. The chain of approval stopped moving. And inside the palace, that was enough. Those who understood the system reportedly recognized it at once as a containment measure, the kind used when an issue is too sensitive to deny openly but too dangerous to allow quietly. Reports suggest Charles reached this point after private consultations with senior advisors, jewel custodians, and trusted voices who understood the emotional force of the tiara. The concern was not simply whether Camilla had the title to wear it. The question was whether the moment could survive the meaning. Because in royal life, timing can turn ceremony into scandal. A jewel meant to strengthen the crown could instead ignite accusations of overreach, entitlement, and disregard for the late Queen's carefully guarded legacy. That is where Charles's decision became so striking. For years, critics have described him as torn between affection and duty, between personal loyalty and constitutional weight. But this time, according to palace whispers, he did not hide behind ambiguity. He allegedly made the call himself. The tiara would not move forward. The request would not be completed. The matter would be contained before it became a national argument. Palace staff were reportedly instructed to minimize further discussion immediately. No speculation, no casual leaks, no emotional explanations. The silence that followed was deliberate, almost icy. It echoed Queen Elizabeth II's old philosophy, the firm before the family, not because family did not matter, but because the crown had survived for generations only by placing institution above desire. For Charles, that choice was reportedly painful. This was not merely a king overruling a queen. It was a husband accepting that love could not rewrite symbolic boundaries. It was a monarch recognizing that some objects carry burdens too heavy for personal reassurance. And in that recognition, the dispute became far larger than Camilla's request. Some insiders claim Charles feared a public storm that could weaken royal stability at the worst possible moment. With his health already a matter of national concern and the future of the monarchy quietly shifting toward William and Catherine, another controversy over jewels could have looked careless, even reckless. So the king acted directly, firmly, emotionally perhaps, but institutionally above all. But the deeper truth behind Charles's decision may have had less to do with ceremony and everything to do with preserving the monarchy's fragile future. As the palace struggled to contain the fallout, attention reportedly shifted toward the emerging alliance quietly reshaping royal power behind closed doors. Because according to insiders familiar with the heirs' accord surrounding William and Catherine, the future king and queen were never expected to remain neutral in a battle involving the crown's most symbolic treasures. Reports suggest William had already made his position clear in private. Iconic royal jewels could not be treated as flexible rewards for modern convenience. They had to be preserved with discipline because every historic piece carried a message the public would instantly understand. To William, according to palace whispers, the danger was not only that Camilla might wear the tiara. The danger was that the crown itself might appear careless with its own sacred language. Catherine's role made the matter even more sensitive. Within royal circles, she is reportedly viewed as the natural future steward of many ceremonial traditions, not because of loud demands, but because of restraint. That restraint has become part of her strength. Like Queen Elizabeth II before her, Catherine's public image has been built around patience, duty, and careful timing. She rarely needs to claim authority directly because the palace often lets symbolism speak for her. This is where the younger Wales household reportedly drew its line. Insiders claim William and Catherine favored continuity over expansion, legacy over emotional entitlement, and preservation over short-term reassurance. They understood that the tiara was not simply connected to Camilla's status. It was connected to the future reign that William would one day inherit and to the image Catherine would eventually carry before the nation. Some royal commentators believe Charles's decision was partly shaped by that future. Blocking the request may have protected the present, but it also guarded what comes next. The monarchy cannot afford symbols that confuse the line of succession or weaken the story it tells about duty. And with Charles facing public concern over his health since early 2024, every decision now seems to echo beyond his own reign. Courtiers reportedly feared another backlash, another wave of headlines, another debate over privilege at a time when the crown needed calm. They had seen how quickly public mood could turn. They knew that one jewel worn at the wrong moment could become more powerful than any speech. And beneath that fear, tensions between Camilla's influence and the Wales household allegedly deepened, not openly, not dramatically, but in the quiet language of access, timing, and approval. Media speculation soon intensified, asking whether the monarchy's center of gravity was already moving away from Charles's court and toward the disciplined future represented by William and Catherine. And by the time the palace finally regained control of the situation, the damage inside royal circles may already have been irreversible. No official statement was issued. No dramatic press conference followed. And yet, according to royal observers, the silence itself became deafening. Because in the monarchy, the most devastating messages are often delivered not through words, but through absence, omission, and quiet exclusion. That was what made the days after the alleged decision so unsettling. The palace did not deny the whispers with force. It did not flood the press with reassuring explanations. It simply moved on as if nothing had happened. But to those who understand royal language, that silence was not peace. It was control. It was a curtain pulled tightly over a room where something serious had already taken place. Then came Camilla's public appearance without the expected historic jewel, and suddenly the omission became its own announcement. Royal watchers began reading the absence like a document. Why that peace? Why not now? Why no clarification? In ordinary life, not wearing a tiara would mean nothing. Inside the monarchy, it can mean everything. The jewel that does not appear can speak louder than the one that does. Palace insiders claim internal tensions remained high for days afterward. Staff were reportedly warned against leaking additional details, a sign that the matter had not faded quietly. It had been contained but not healed. That distinction mattered because containment protects the institution from public damage, but it does not erase private humiliation. And humiliation inside royal circles has a long memory. Comparisons were soon made to previous silent royal punishments, moments when the monarchy did not shout but simply removed access. Invitations vanished, privileges narrowed, familiar symbols were withheld. The person affected was never publicly attacked. Yet everyone close enough to the center understood the message. That is why commentators began describing the situation as symbolic distancing, not exile, not open rejection, something colder, a reminder that even a crowned position can have invisible limits. For Camilla, the silence may have been more painful than a formal refusal. A public statement could have been argued with. A private decision wrapped in silence could only be endured. And for Charles, the quiet strategy allowed him to avoid open conflict while still protecting the royal line from another damaging controversy. But public fascination grew precisely because the palace refused to explain. Every unanswered question pulled more attention toward the missing tiara. Every careful appearance seemed to carry the weight of what had been withheld. And behind the controlled smiles, the monarchy's oldest truth resurfaced again. Power is not always shown by what is granted. Sometimes power is revealed by what is quietly taken away. But behind the polished royal appearances and carefully staged smiles, another reality was beginning to emerge, one that could permanently reshape the balance of influence around the king. For years, royal insiders have whispered about an invisible divide inside the House of Windsor, a divide between those protecting the institution and those accused of reshaping it around personal influence. And according to various interpretations of recent events, the tiara conflict may have exposed the divide more clearly than ever before. Because once the request was blocked and the silence settled, the dispute stopped being just a question of jewelry. It became a test of the monarchy's survival instincts. The crown has always protected itself through symbols, traditions, and invisible boundaries that ordinary families could never understand. A tiara may look like beauty to the public, but inside the royal system, it can function like permission, status, and authority all at once. That is why the old guard reportedly viewed this moment as a line in the sand. Queen Elizabeth II's influence still seemed to move through the palace like an unseen command. Her reign had trained courtiers to think beyond emotion, beyond popularity, beyond temporary comfort. Reports suggest senior traditionalists quietly backed Charles because they believed he was defending not only a jewel but the sacred discipline she left behind. To them, Queen Mary's diamond coronation tiara belonged to the institution first, history second, and personal desire last. That belief made the conflict heavier. It suggested that Camilla's influence, though public and official, was still being measured privately. She had the title. She had the position. She had walked through the coronation itself. Yet this dispute allegedly revealed that certain doors inside the monarchy do not open automatically. Some symbols still require deeper trust, and trust inside the House of Windsor is earned slowly, guarded fiercely, and withdrawn without apology. Comparisons were drawn to older royal tensions, moments when succession, marriage, and public legitimacy collided. The monarchy has survived abdication, scandal, broken marriages, and bitter rivalries. But each crisis left behind a lesson. The crown must never appear captured by personal need. That lesson reportedly shaped the response to Camilla's request. The institution could absorb private disappointment, but it could not afford symbolic confusion. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was said to be icy but controlled. No open war, no dramatic rupture, just the hard, polished stillness of a family that knows how to fight without raising its voice. Camilla's circle reportedly faced new scrutiny, while Charles appeared to lean more heavily on the old rules that had protected the monarchy long before his reign began. And beneath it all, one truth became impossible to ignore. The guardians of legacy had struck back without needing to announce victory. They had used silence, protocol, and denial of access as their weapons. Not brutal in appearance, but devastating in effect. And as the dust slowly settled across palace corridors, one final realization began haunting everyone involved. In the end, the battle over Queen Mary's diamond coronation tiara was never truly about gemstones, fashion, or ceremony. It was about something far older and far more unforgiving. The question of who gets trusted with the living symbolism of the British crown once the cameras disappear and the palace doors close. By then, the tiara had become more than a jewel. It had become a mirror held up to the monarchy itself. In its diamonds, courtiers reportedly saw legitimacy, continuity, restraint, and the dangerous cost of crossing invisible lines. For Charles, the decision was said to be deeply painful because it forced him into the oldest royal conflict of all, loyalty to the person beside him or duty to the institution above him. And once again, the crown demanded the harsher choice. Reports suggest the palace chose preservation over personal preference. Not because emotion had disappeared, but because monarchy cannot survive by emotion alone. It survives through discipline, symbols, and the careful protection of what the public believes those symbols mean. Queen Mary's tiara could not become a reward, a reassurance, or a gesture of private comfort. It had to remain what generations had made it, a sign of authority guarded by history. That is why William and Catherine emerged from the dispute as quiet figures of stability. They did not need to dominate the story. Their influence worked through restraint. William represented the future that had to be protected, while Catherine reportedly stood as the natural heir to a style of royal duty shaped by patience, humility, and careful symbolism. In that contrast, Camilla's position became more complicated. She was queen. Yet this episode allegedly showed that a title does not automatically erase every boundary. Royal commentators described the incident as a warning about the limits of influence. Inside the House of Windsor, access is never just access. Permission is never just permission. A withheld jewel can become a verdict. And above all of it, Queen Elizabeth II's shadow seemed to remain present, still shaping decisions through the legacy she left behind. The crown in the end was larger than Charles, larger than Camilla, larger than any single reign. It belonged to the story the monarchy tells about itself. Duty over desire, history over impulse, institution over individual need. And for those inside palace walls, the lesson was chillingly clear. Because within the House of Windsor, jewels may sparkle for the public, but behind palace walls, they still decide who truly belongs to history.